About to begin our program, I would like to request all of you to be seated and make yourself comfortable. Also, as a reminder, please keep your phones in a silent mode to avoid any disturbances. Thank you for your cooperation. Which is on traditional and non-traditional security issue in South Asia, jointly organized by CLAWS-NIICE. I am Diksha Shrestha and I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your presence at this annual dialogue program. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a slight change in the program's schedule since our chief guest, Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, former Prime Minister of Nepal, will arrive at 3. We will start first with the technical session. To start with the technical session, may I request Dr. Deepak Prakashpat to chair the first session. Dr. Deepak Prakashpat is a founding chairperson of Nepal Center for Security Governance. He holds a PhD from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Currently, he is a member of Parliament, the House of Representatives, Nepal. He served as a member of Technical Committee and Secretariat of the Special Committee for Supervision, Integration and Rehabilitation of Nepal of Maoist Army Combatants from March 2009 to December 2012. He is a faculty at several universities of Nepal. The panelists are Dr. Jyoti Pathania, Senior Fellow CLAWS, Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma, Distinguished Fellow CLAWS, Ms. Sumitra Karki, Program Coordinator NIICE, and Dr. Chandra Pandey, Assistant Professor, Kathmandu University. Each speaker will get maximum of 10 to 12 minutes. Sir, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Namaskar, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to welcome you all in the very unique program organized by NIICE and CLAWS. It's the first kind of national or the annual dialogue on traditional and the non-traditional security issues in South Asia. So I'm thankful to these two organizations providing me this opportunity to chair the session. And I welcome all the participants, especially the distinguished participants from the security community, the strategy community who has been working here, and of course in India with the CLAWS and in the many other organizations. And in this unique kind of annual dialogue and organized by these two very prominent institutions, as we know, though it has not been in the much scenario that organizing regular seminars and the workshops or the conferences, NIICE and the CLAWS. The CLAWS is very renowned defense think tank of India, has been leading and always remaining in the top 100 and top 50, and even before going up and up with its renowned publications in the world's strategic and the global think tanks. And I think better, without going into details of all other things, I will start the technical session where we'll be talking about the current non-traditional security challenges in South Asia, focusing on Nepal and India, and of course its regional impacts. And as we have seen that the security discourse has been rapidly changing in the given context, internationally, regionally, sub-regionally, and nationally, and locally, and individually. So it has transcended the boundaries with the new form of the globalization and digitization, and many issues ranging from traditional security, armed forces, defense forces, paramilitary forces, to civic engagement and civilian issues, where we can talk about river, and ranging up to the environmental challenges and food security and all these things. I think paper presenter will cover on these dimensions. So I think, first of all, I would request Dr. Jyoti M. Pasania to make her presentation on conceptual analysis regarding the non-traditional security. She has been Senior Fellow and Chairman of the CLAWS-NIICE Committee at the CLAWS, New Delhi.
A very good afternoon to all of you. And at the outset, I must tell you that non-traditional security as a topic is something which is recently being talked about in not only academic circles but also in policy circles. What does it mean? What is the typology? How is it related to international security? How is India and Nepal going to tackle non-traditional security issues? What are the recommendations? It is not possible to talk about all these things in just about 10 minutes' time. But I'm going to collate my data and try and be as precise as I can be possible. To begin with, I just want to say that everybody knows about traditional security because it is related to military. But what we see coming and touching and affecting our lives is non-traditional security. How do I intend covering my presentation? You know, non-traditional security in its various forms has assumed greater prominence in the security discourse today. And as I told you, not only amongst the policymakers, also amongst the practitioners, amongst us, the scholars. Primarily so because the agenda of security has broadened to include issues like water, energy, climate, cyber, and to top it all, what affects our region, terrorism. Slowly, gradually, but firmly, I believe these are evolving into traditional security issues, and because of non-traditional security issues evolving themselves as traditional security concerns, it is not going to be easy to address them. So, in hindsight, what I can see is that slowly and gradually these are evolving into a significant traditional security concern if they are left unaddressed and unattended to. So my paper attempts to trace the etymology of non-traditional thinking, including the historical perspective, to talk about the various theories, paradigms, and metaphors which are involved in this field. Then I'll talk about the shift in the security paradigm from traditional security, which is primarily military, to the non-military security issues, and see if there is any interface. Interface, in other words, means linkages between traditional and non-traditional security issues. And in the end, I would like to propose some recommendations primarily for the South Asian region. Now, coming to etymology. What do I mean by etymology? Etymology primarily means the genesis, how this term, the notion of non-traditional security, came about in the field of international relations. I would deal with the etymology by, again, dividing it into two topics, or rather two subtopics, the concept and the genesis. If you see the concept of non-traditional security, I have again divided it into the pre-Cold War era and the post-Cold War era. Why did I do so? Because starting from 1648, Treaty of Westphalia, when the political sovereignty and territorial integrity of a nation was supposed to be sacrosanct, to the demise of the Cold War, when suddenly you had economic security, you had cultural security, which came into prominence, the dividing line was the demise of the Cold War. So what happened? The historical picture, as I already told you, Cold War security, post-Cold War security. Cold War security limited to territorial and political security. So then what happened? Demise of Cold War, after Cold War, like I told you, issues like economic and environment security came into prominence. So a term of comprehensive security came into the understanding of international relations. Of security remained the state. State remained the primary facing motive of security. So state was the end-all and be-and-all of security. So when did this change? Yes, it changed in the decade of 90s. And why do I say that? Because in the 90s, for the first time, the concept of human security came about. What happened was the discourse on security shifted in the 90s from the individual, from the state being the prima facie motive or being the prominent actor, it became the individual. The Human Security Report was written by Mehboob Haq. It was a UNDP report, and of course he was assisted by Professor Gustav Ranes. He was from the Yale University. So we see that the discourse on security changed. I will not say changed, I will say it enhanced. So there was reorientation of security discourse by including human or the individual security. So now I come to the genesis. Where did this thinking of non-traditional security come about? Before I talk about these factors written there, in my research I found the concept or the genealogy of this idea of non-traditional thinking dates back to 361 BC. If there are some bells ringing, if they are not, I am referring to Kautilya. Kautilya's Arthashastra, it is a book on statecraft, where he says it is the individual welfare, the people's welfare, which is the keystone of the state policy. So he says, and I quote, in the happiness of his subjects lies the king's happiness, and whatever pleases the people shall be considered good. For the welfare of the people, the state has to carry out the development activities. This national organized crime, which is influencing not only our region but world over event, the 9/11 is evident in front of all of us. So now I just give you a quick roundabout of the 60s. These were some reports, some debates which happened in 60s which talked about non-traditional security. In the 70s, Kanti Bajpai says, and I quote him, reports, series of multinational independent commissions were composed during the 70s, and these were the forerunners for non-traditional security thinking. Which were these reports? Multinational World Order Model Project, Club of Rome Promptipty, these were the essays which were composed. In the 80s, so I've covered 60s, 70s, 80s, the reports which talked about non-traditional security or had linkages to them were the North-South report. Now this report was written by Willy Brandt, and he for the first time showed the divide, the alarming divide between the North and the South. And I don't have to say what constitutes the North and South, we all understand that. Olive Palme came out with a report on disarmament and security studies, which came out as Common Security Report. In fact, he came out with a very unique term. He said, caring security. You know, you care about the life, the dignity of the individual. So that was of prime importance. So far and so forth. Then we come on to the 90s. I did mention previously, and I'm again mentioning and reinstating now, two major reports in the 90s. The Stockholm Initiative on Global Security, which primarily talked about environment degradation. It talked about excessive population growth. It talked about lack of progress towards democracy. So that too was one of the ingredients of non-traditional security. But I'm mindful of the fact it was the UNDP report. Again, I'm mentioning the UNDP report, which for the first time came out with the word human security, and so the security came to be equated with the security of the individual, not the territory, not the state. So human security, and I quote him, says, will be achieved through development and not through arms or armaments. Major reports again.
Dr. Jyoti, you have 3 minutes.
I'll try, but 3 minutes is not going to work. I think I'm going to request the chair to give me at least 5 more minutes. In the 20s, the most important report which affects us was this non-traditional security challenges in South Asia report. It says there are 80 million South Asians, which constitute almost half of the region's population. They live in hotspot areas, which are geographical areas that will experience fewer crop yields, worsening health conditions, and declining productivity. So in net, he says, last 25 years, the natural disasters and environmental degradation have killed nearly 500,000 of people in the region. When we talk about security, whose security are we referring to? How will you identify the issue which comes up or rises to the level of security? Whose values are being threatened? Is it yours or mine, or is it the state? What means are available to counter those threats? Who is to provide for protection against those threats? Who will pay for the cost of the protection of those threats? So the subject matter of non-traditional security is under-researched. It is at a nascent stage, I still feel. The conceptual technicalities and weak theoretical tools make it very difficult to have one-pronged approach. There are various peoples who've talked about pluralistic approach, but the only theory in international relations which correlates to non-traditional security is the liberal paradigm, which talks about individual security approach. The domain of traditional security is very well defined, but of non-traditional security, it is broad. It is not well defined. So, is there an interface or interlinkage between traditional and non-traditional? Yes. But again, the problem is what to include, what not to include. So the problem is of unmanageable concept. It is devoid of meaning. The coherent paradigm is difficult because, there are diverse issues. Environment, you need a whole set of discipline. You need a whole concept. You need whole analysis, conceptual tools to deal with environment. You can't just club it in non-traditional security and then it's difficult. You need separate security paradigms for them. It affects all of us. So why is non-traditional security important? Because it is beyond the capacity of the state to tackle them alone. And these are increasing interdependent issues. We need a collective action from the South Asian countries, especially for cross-border terrorism and water, environment, health and security. What are the strategies? There is a transnational solution for transnational problem. If you see the Himalayas, the glacial melt of the Himalayas is going to cause a water crisis in our South Asian region. It's time that we wake up. The youth bulge. What I'm hoping is that the youth of now, of today, perhaps they are not carrying the baggage of our ancestors' thought process. Why do I say that? Because, they were born at the partition time. Perhaps this generation, this youth, is more pragmatic, is more practical, is willing to work and cooperate in the region. It is our own man-made bottlenecks. It is the artificial bottlenecks, not the natural bottlenecks. And what are those? Political hurdles? What shall I say? Terrorism? Yes, of course. And we do need to take a firm stand on it someday or the other. And I think it is the time now. We have to work on sub-regional or regional efforts to tackle issues like terrorism. Because it's not going to stop. It is only going to enhance. So in the end, I would just say that a nation must look beyond conventional military security threats, address these non-traditional security issues, in order to have a stable, comprehensive and holistic security. Thank you for your patient understanding.
I hope that we will have a brief Q&A session at the end. And now, without delaying, I would request Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma to make his presentation. He is of that region of J&K. He has MPhil from Madras University and PhD from the Meredith University. He is a regular contributor to the professional journals as also lectures in various institutions.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatt. Thank you, Dr. Jaswal, for inviting us over and for this excellent beginning that we are making today. Chair, distinguished panelists, distinguished audience, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My proud privilege to speak today in this inaugural session of NIICE CLAWS interaction that begins from today, and I hope we make a history. It's a great beginning, and one wonders why it didn't happen earlier, but it's happened today, and I hope it will go from strength to strength. Dr. Pathani has already spoken, and the first speaker takes the thunder off everybody else's speech. So won't make much time, and there are eminent speakers speaking subsequently on various issues, so I will not touch those issues. I will say only 2 to 3 issues which I think are relevant to us. Firstly is I personally feel that this word security has been much maligned and made difficult for understanding of practitioners. It is suited to the academic world to confuse the issue by including everything in the word security. It wasn't like this earlier. I don't agree with Mr. Chanakya, what Mr. Chanakya said whenever he said. Everything which is human development, it is development of a man. Human being is a human being. He is not a security being. So when you wanted to confuse the issues, all the Western people who could not find anything suitable to write when the Cold War ended, they said, okay, let's make everything security. So it broadened the issue and made the security issues more and more incoherent. And then they divided between traditional and non-traditional because they felt, I would feel so, that they felt that in the interstate wars are few left in subsequent times. And since interstate wars are few, security issues must be expanded in a form that they actually affect more and more people. So this issue has caused immense amount of incoherence, and we need to address the very basics of incoherence. And when they started including the issues of non-traditional threat, the issues included is in virtually everything. Everything that can happen has been included into the ambit of non-traditional threat, and who is to handle it? They are bureaucrats and politicians, because they are the ones who are security managers now, because these issues become their being. Education is also a security issue, which has to be handled by our education ministry. So you can keep expanding the word and cause more and more confusion. So that's the basic thing I start with. Is there a blurring of lines between traditional and non-traditional? I would say yes. And when you talk academically non-traditional, I would say one example in subcontinent, of course, when you talk India, everybody talks India and you just talk Pakistan automatically. So when I just can't avoid talking Pakistan or China for that matter. Anytime the tension grows between India and Pakistan, first thing that comes up in all media is Indus Water Treaty. Water is a non-traditional threat. But Indus Water Treaty comes to fore as a traditional threat. Whenever there are issues which relate to China, we talk about Brahmaputra or Sangpo as we know it, and there are obvious relationships between these issues. So where does a traditional start and where does non-traditional start is all very confusing. Their security landscape has overlapped. So there are developmental issues which are now termed as largely non-traditional threats. And it's become all inclusive, from cyber to food, water, energy, climate change, transnational crime, which police ought to do is also security threat, terrorism, disaster relief, economic performance, etc. Which I think matter tremendously now for all of us, you in Nepal. And believe me, I am as much at home in Nepal, and I could have given this talk in fluent Nepali because I have spent 40 years in Lurka, so I know this is my bread and butter. But of course, mine is Raipura and Limbukura, which many others who are the valley people may not understand. So mine is a more rustic kind of Nepal. No, that age is telling now. Water. Lord Buddha. One of the first gentlemen who started bringing peace on water issue was Lord Buddha. There were two tribes, Sakya and Kaliya, who fought on water over a river. He was related to both of them. One was his parental issues, and another was his cousins. And he tried to bring peace because the river was flowing between these two tribes, and he made a 5-member committee, Lord Buddha those days, and attempted to bring peace between two tribes who were fighting over water issues on a single tribe. So it's historical. Water is a problem here. But water is significant because of many other relationships. Some of you might fly over territories and which have got paddy cultivation. Punjab, in India you fly over Punjab, or you fly over the Tarai regions of Nepal, and you see the whole fields are flooded with water. It looks flood. Actually it's not flood, it is paddy cultivation. It's a typology of paddy cultivation we do, which is so highly water intensive that it sucks in the immense amount of water in cultivating paddy. So there are interrelationship between water and food, and which is very important. And in case, as Madam said earlier, if the temperatures are rising by say 2 degrees in every decade or 1.5 degrees every decade, then obviously there is a problem of melting of snows. Himalayas are known to be the third pole. You know, it is 10 countries touching Himalayas. It's one of the largest ranges here. If there is a problem of water scarcity going to come up in time, as has been spoken, then there is a problem of management of water. And water is a trans-boundary asset. It is not an individual nation's address. And there are opinions against those treaties because they say it is not beneficial to some people, it may be beneficial to some, it may not be beneficial to others. So water becomes a source of great constraint here, and that needs to be addressed tremendously. There is urgency here because there is rising population, there is increased urbanization, rampant poverty still there in our region, and there are issues about precipitation changes. Now there are regions here which, if you say historic, actually we don't have such historical data also, but the fact is some areas which you have a massive amount of rainfall earlier, and subsequently rainfall patterns have changed and rainfalls have moved elsewhere. You see, I commanded a corps in Ladakh, and in Ladakh is supposed to be a rain shadow region, no rainfall. There are no trees in Ladakh, and I'm giving you an instance here. And you know, some wise person like me went and started planting trees there, and it started raining there. Now it started raining there because of the plantation of trees. There has been massive landslides in Ladakh. And you know, once the Dalai Lama visited, he said, "Yeah, nature had said don't plant trees here. You plant trees where you're supposed to plant trees. Don't plant trees in places where no trees are supposed to be planted. You have caused devastation in this area." So there has been a change into the rainfall patterns, which has made areas arid and made other areas with surfeit of rainfall. That causes immense amount of change into the patterns out here. And second issue which I wish to raise is migration. You would have heard about Syrian migrants and who have gone across to Germany, right up to Scandinavian countries, and causing immense amount of problems there. Because they go into ghettos, they are put into small areas. And
3 minutes.
3 minutes, I'll take 2, sir. Yes. So the migration is one very significant issue. And there are positives of migration because when people shift across one country to another country, they send remittances back home, so the home people get more money to deal with. And then there are regions which are starved of people working. In India also we say people of this territory are not so hardworking, so you require labor from outside, so migrants come and help. But migration also causes major amount of problems in form of demographic changes, and that needs to be addressed. 15-20 years ago, there was a gentleman called Madhav Godbole who studied migrations in this region, and he said, water flows to regions which are lower in altitude, so you have to manage. Populations will move, migrations will take place. They take place to areas where there is economic opportunities available. You can't deny this. Only thing to be managed is how to manage this migration. In regions as composite as India is, we need to manage migration and not to say deny migrations. It can't be stopped. And then migrations also take place because of problems that take place of ham-handed policies of government, like Rohingyas. Now you see Rohingyas who have moved by millions. They have moved from Myanmar and came across to Bangladesh. They are in massive camps in Bangladesh. They came across to India, and from India they have moved into select pockets of India. India is a large country, but they have not gone all over. So there is management of movement of Rohingyas, which causes problems. So there is a need, and one way is to have a system of work permits or a system of biometric identification where people can move. Yes, you have your identification of your previous country, you have biometrics available, and so you can work into this country for a long time, maybe 2 years, 10 years, 20 years, but you are not a citizen of that country, so you don't get the privileges of voting, etc. So there is a management required on migrations. And the third and the last one that I wish to raise is aspiration. See, ours is in South Asia is an aspirational society. You know, when we were kids, my mothers used to keep matkas at home, pani rakhne ke liye. Aajkal कोई मटका रख देना, मन बढ़ देना, मटका क्या हो? Everybody wants a fridge because he sees a fridge as a developmental issue. You know, and as we grow up, you know, there were no fans earlier in major hills. Now everybody wants an air conditioner. And he says, when the chap is driving a motorcycle, why can't I get a bike? The aspirations of our society is rising high. Everybody wants, his expectations are that I want it tomorrow. I don't want to save money for 20 years and then develop my house and build a house or make something else. We are an aspirational subcontinent where people are aspiring for better living. We are not, and which comes to the basics of socio-economic development. It cannot be denied for tomorrow because people won't accept it, and then there will be agitated policies. The agitation starts from this demand of the people to rise and get what he feels his neighbor has got and he hasn't got it. And he wants it today. He doesn't want to save money for tomorrow. That aspiration and that social economic weaknesses in various regions, or which is an imbalanced development between region A and region B, which causes immense amount of grief in the societies. And causes element of society. Thank you very much, Dr. Bhatt. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I'll take on questions as they come up.
Thank you. Thank you for your thing. As we skipped our inaugural part, and still we're waiting for our chief guest. So now I will request Sumitra Karki. She is a program coordinator at the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. She will be speaking on human trafficking in South Asia. She has been working as a research associate at NIICE. She works on issues related to China and South Asia. She is a faculty of Modern Kanya Multiple College, Kathmandu. She holds master's degree in sociology and pursuing masters in economics from Liberty University.
Thank you, Chair. After listening to such a senior speaker, and hope you have that much patience to listen to me, I directly enter into my topic, and my presentation topic is human trafficking in South Asia.
The alliance of mountainous countries.
It contains what is human trafficking, definition, misconceptions of human trafficking, which we have, and introduction, and how it works, in what form it works, and types of human trafficking, and how does it happen sometimes, causes of human trafficking, how to help to prevent it, and lastly, I am explaining about South Asian countries and human trafficking in a slide. So I start with what is human trafficking. According to United Nations, the requirements, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of portion by improper means such as force, abduction, fraud, or coercion for an improper purpose, including forced labor or sexual exploitation, is known as human trafficking. We do have misconceptions regarding human trafficking. We generally think human trafficking includes only sexual harassment or sexual slavery, but in reality, human trafficking includes forced labor, domestic servitude, or organ harvesting as well. We do have misconceptions about human trafficking that we think it happens only transnationally. but human trafficking many times happen inside the nation. If the excuse me, I'm sorry for wasting your time. Human trafficking happen only in developing countries, but nowadays human trafficking is not only a problem of developing countries, but human trafficking is a problem for developed country as well. Because developed country has so many resources and instruction to do it as so much better. I'm going to introduce human trafficking. Human trafficking is the third largest international crime. It is over 1 million people trafficked annually. A group of crimes involve exploitation of men, women and children for financial gains is known as human trafficking. Human trafficking is a part of the larger problems of slavery. How it works? It works in three forms like act, means and purpose. In act, we can say what is done as an act. It happens in the form of requirement, transportation, transfer, harboring and receipt of persons. And in a means, the act has been done by threat of use of force, coercion and abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, giving payments, benefits to the person in control of victims. For sex and human trafficking for organs. Here inside in picture we can see the different form of human trafficking which includes these three topics. Now how does it happen sometimes? It happens sometimes in poor families who are sell their children to gain some money and survive their day-to-day life. And children sometimes it happens children who are worked to buy freedom, and poor desperate men, women to buy freedom and bonded into debt. They have no chances to repaying and natural disaster. Here I mention natural disaster, but after the devastating earthquake happened in Nepal 2015, the ratio of human trafficking has raised very high. The political instability, status of violence against women and children, low risk and high profit, gender discriminations, lack of education, lack of public awarenesses and attraction of foreign employment. The last line is major in Nepal. All wants to go outside and gain lots of money. How to help prevent it? We can help so many organizations which are working in human trafficking to protect human trafficking, to slow down human trafficking. We can fundraising those organizations, or we can volunteer from ourselves. And advocacy is another way to prevent human trafficking. Help survivors. We can help survivors and give them a chance to live their life and help raise awarenesses. Now, India, the Middle East, especially Gulf countries, Asia and East Africa, including Kenya. The US government's 2015 Trafficking in Persons report has ranked Nepal as a Tier 2 country, which means that the government of Nepal does not fully meet the minimum standard of elimination of trafficking, although it is making significant efforts towards this end. We have several national laws, and it defines a crime of serious nature. A person indicted for human trafficking faces a 20-year jail sentence along with fine of up to 2 lakh. Similarly, a person involved in transporting a victim can face 10 to 15 years jail sentence and a fine from 50,000 to 1 lakh. There are several laws. Constitution on Nepal 2072, Article 29(3), Human Trafficking and Transportation Control Act 2064, Muluki N, Chapter on Trafficking. Now, this is a cross-border human trafficking is most common through Nepal and India border. But nowadays, the recent report has stated that Chinese traffickers are also active in Nepal. Bangladesh and human trafficking. Transport girls within Chittagong and Dhaka transnationally Kathmandu and Kolkata to work as sex workers, labor shop hands and fishermen, predators, foreigners and Chinese men. In Bangladesh, Rohingya refugees problem is major and they are the main victims of human trafficking. Transit points for Nepali women subject, now I'm talking on Sri Lanka and human trafficking. Transit point for Nepali women subjected to forced labor in Middle East. Boys more likely than girls to be exploited in commercial sex in coastal areas for child sex tourism. This figure shows investigation and suspects of Sri Lanka. Now I am entering into India and human trafficking, social inequality, regional gender performance, imbalance and corruption are the leading causes of human trafficking in India. Bride trafficking, illegal sale of women is in practice in rural northern states where the sex ratio is worse than national average and bride trafficking has become a norm. And the West Bengal it has higher rates of female human trafficking. Now Maldives and human trafficking. The Maldives is a destination country for men, women and children subjected to forced labor and sex trafficking and source country for women and children subjected to labor sex trafficking. The anti-trafficking bill introduced in December 2013 criminalized sexual exploitation and forced labor in Maldives. Now Pakistan and human trafficking. According to the Global Slavery Index reports, Pakistan has the third highest population of enslaved people in the world and is one of the primary sources of human trafficking. There are news of Pakistani girls being trafficked to China, and the figure shows number of human smuggling trafficking arrests since 2014 to 2017. Now Afghanistan and human trafficking. Over last 5 years, Afghanistan is a source, transit and destination country for men, women and children subjected to forced labor for sex trafficking. Afghan women and girls are subjected to sex trafficking and domestic servitude primarily in Pakistan, Iran and India, including through forced marriage in Iran and Pakistan. And human trafficking happen in nearly every country in the world, developing and developed countries. We are now living in a world where human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprises. 75% of human trafficking is for sexual exploitations and are female, and over 50% of all human trafficking victims are children. These individuals are forced to work every single day without pay and under threat of violence, and they are unable to walk away. Stand against human trafficking and let's do it before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And the technical session will continue. Now Dr. Chandralal Pandey will make his presentation on Narayani to conduct trajectory of the transboundary water governance and the civic engagement. He has been doing his research, in-depth research in this particular area for many days. He is assistant professor at the Kathmandu University. Dr. Pandey.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chief Guest, distinguished panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We already had 3 different presentations on traditional, non-traditional security issues and human trafficking. I will also be talking, I think, in the line of this non-traditional security issue, particularly focusing on water. I think water is life, and water is one of the most important components for our livelihood also. And many scholars have started to say that if we ever have, let's not have that. World war, that world war would be water war in the future. Although this statement can be a sweeping statement, but we can see a number of examples related to water. In this presentation, in particular, this presentation is an initiative of CLAWS-NIICE, that is Trans-Boundary Rivers of South Asia, actually funded by Shimot and Norwegian government in Oxfam. We are two partners, particularly Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai and then Kathmandu University. We are the two partners. And we've been conducting this research for the last 1 year, and it's going to be completed in December 2019. So instead of talking about broad issues of what is non-traditional security or security, I will especially focus on the research what we are doing. If you look at water or transboundary areas, particularly what we see is whenever we talk about any kind of agreement, we can always see that the agreement takes place between state and state. For example, if we talk about India and Nepal, because it's Narayani to Gandak, India and Nepal, let's say. So here what we see is Kathmandu is talking to Delhi and Delhi is talking to Kathmandu, right? And that's important. I think that's the very much IR style of doing things, which is very, very important until now. But then at the same time, you can see some lexicons there. For example, mutual interest of the two countries, mutual benefit of the two countries. That's also fantastic, which is good. But if you look at all these agreements, what you see is these agreements have focused on irrigation and then power, right? And in terms of, let's say, South Asian countries, irrigation is very important, and electricity definitely. We were in the darkness in the past. Electricity is also very, very important. But then when we talk about this irrigation and power by building big dams at the time, we keep forgetting, or this trans-boundary water governance, they forget about the impacts or effects these dams or these kinds of development activities take place in command areas and beyond, right? That is what we always found to be ignored. That's the one thing. And then even the role of civil society, the state and state, they talk. And sometimes it happens that states or civil servants might have visited the field, they have some kind of understanding, but exactly those communities which live in those areas, their understanding might not be reflected in those kinds of agreements. So, in Chitwan, in these areas, in India also, in Bihar region, what we found is, the way we have developed our trans-boundary river agreements, they are not actually capturing the essence of command areas people. Although they might have helped to develop hinterland areas at the coast of communities which live just around the river where we build these big dams. Just an understanding, I think if you have a look at that, transboundary river systems, particularly in Nepal, we have Ganges, let's say, and the Kanali and Saptakosi also. These are three big, let's say, river systems which ultimately go to Bay of Bengal. And just have a look on this map. And if you talk about Narayani river system, there are also 7 rivers which come together and then becomes, let's say, Narayani in Nepal, and as soon as it enters India, there, and then one canal called Eastern Main Canal that takes water to Bihar of India, and then we have Western Canal that takes water to Uttar Pradesh. And you can also see, I don't have pointer here today because of this arrangement, I think it's difficult. But then you can also see that there is one Nepal Gandak Western Canal also, Nepal Gandak Eastern Canal as well, right? To Nepali territory, which you don't see there actually. And the same case if you go to Inarua of India for a field visit, you see that the canal goes, this Dawn Canal goes, Dawn Canal goes there. But as soon as the time happens that water enters into Nepali territory, you don't even see water actually into Nepali territory also. But these are some, let's say, schematic pictures that you can see, and you can ask the presentation also to study it better later. Particularly for this project, we had 3 objectives. One is to explore transboundary civic engagement, how civil societies are engaged in these transboundary agreements. For river governance from within the historical, social, and cultural context of communities sharing the international borders. Number 2 objective was to identify barriers, challenges, limitations, and opportunities for transboundary civic engagement in river water governance. And then to evolve the gender inclusive, because we wanted to focus on gender issues also, because we believe that the role of women becomes very, very important in terms of water management, and we wanted to look in that sense as well. Our method, we gave 784 billion hectares compared to what is there in Nepal actually. The MEC also feeds into the Nepal Eastern Canal to provide 24.1 m3 second water to irrigate 37,000 hectares of land in Bara, Pasa, Rautar districts. But this also does not seem to be happening when you visit the point from where water enters into Nepal side. And generally, if you go to the power station which is located at the border of Nepal, in Nepal, let's say, Surajpur, then ideally when the agreement was signed at the time, it was supposed to be producing 15 megawatt of electricity. But when we went for the field visit, it was only producing 3.27 megawatt. So it's so sort of actual agreement and understanding. And then the effects, particularly, I'm trying to focus here, not everything, but what happens with people who are in the command areas, who have some aspirations, as he said, or some kind of benefit also, living in the, in and around this riparian side of the river. One first, important thing that we need to understand here is flood risks. Every time when it's rainy season, there's a lot of flood, because of Narayani River itself. And then in Nepal side, we have this western Gandak Canal that takes water to Uttar Pradesh. And it is actually bordered and separated, compartmented the land area of Nepal. So what happens when other rivers, other small rivers, what we call this seasonal rivers, when they occur in rainy season, at that time, this side gets flooded, and there's no any pathway to go water from this side to Narayani River. So there's a lot of flood in those areas, and you can go any time of the year and you can see plenty of water there, inundation, right? Those things. Waterlogging is there, submergence of fertile lands. That is, those are some of the things that people of these command areas and Nepal areas suffer actually there. And then, there's sand deposition also, and river bed erosion in both sides, in Nepal side as well as in Indian side also. This, in India they call it katab, in Nepal they call it soil erosion, or what you call something like that. And this problem is because of too much of water and too little water. When people of these command areas, they need water, there is no water for them to use. In Nepal side, if you go, instead of using water from Narayani River, they are using water from groundwater. That's being used. The government of India, they are not, maybe they are willing, they might not have enough time to do that. But then,
Pandey, you have 3 minutes to finish.
yes, but then, they don't get paid on timely manner. So that's the one thing. And when your land is gone, livelihood thing, your psychological tension, all these different kinds of things are there. And then, even the banks in Nepal side are not willing to give any money to these people who live there, because their property cannot be sold. And our data suggests us that even people are not willing to give their daughter to get married in those areas. So those kinds of traumas, those kinds of pains are there. From outside, wow, agreement, transbounding water agreement, looks fantastic, but inside those kinds of pains and sufferings are there with the people at local level. These are some of the stories from the field. As I'm running out of time, I think it's not worth reading all those kinds of things, but you can read what exactly is happening with people. Exactly in the voice of people. And now we look from, because we want to look from the civic engagement lens and gender, what we find is state-centric agreement provides no space for community civic engagement. However, we have framed civic engagement from 4 different perspectives, both in India and Nepal. Project affected community, that's one. Another is cause of the river. Another one is river ecosystem. And another one is faulty development and disasters. So what we see is civic activism in Nepal is primarily from the frame of range of agreement. Women voices and participation appear in various local community struggle committees. There are active civic engagement movements in Nepal, where it's the cases of India absolute. For example, if you talk about Narayani Gandak, they have Gandak Nadi Niyantran Sangharsha Samiti. They did strike 34 days, and there was 21 points agreement. Some of these agreements points have been fulfilled, but others the important. Now, if you really want to contribute, if you really want to change this kind of mindset and then try to understand the pain, suffering, trauma of these people in those areas, what potentially could be done is, in short here, move beyond capture the essence of command communities and hinterlands develop. You can focus on both sides. Expand the lexicons from mutual interest and benefit to riparian rights, upstream rights, and equitable benefit sharing instead of mutual only. Improve transboundary institutional arrangements with space for community civic women engagement. Strengthen the roles of provinces and municipalities in change context. Here in Nepal, in India already they have province and then local government bodies as well. In dealing localized effects of trans-boundary water agreements. Intricate and mainstream DRR, for example, effective risk communication from Nepal to India, and early warning system etc. in CBTO's local, district and provincial development and trans-boundary levels. The need for immediate revision of the agreement, because most of the people, they think, particularly in Nepal side, that agreement needs to be revisited. To share equitable benefits of the trans-boundary river and preparedness against too much and too little of water, resulting into water-induced disasters remain a distant items on the agenda because of this IR thinking of agreement making. For now, but they need immediate attention. With this, I conclude my presentation here. Thank you very much for listening to your time.
Thank you. As we are under time pressure, so we'll have a brief Q&A if possible. So let's go for a few questions, or you can pinpoint. I think not more than 4 questions. So at least we can have 1 question to either, and then we can have a more interaction during the tea session and the next technical session. So yes.
My name is Mitra Bandhu Paudel. I am associate with NBR Global Business Review. Just I would like to ask to Dr. Pandey. It's about you talking about river ecosystem. Last month when I was visiting Nawalparasi, especially I was talking to some entrepreneur there, and also the wildlife, naturalists there. They have the serious concern about the development that Nepal is dreaming, bringing the sheep, from upstream through Narayani River. What they were talking to me was basically you are going to destroy many aquatic life as well as endangered species such as gharial and magar crocodile, not only those animals but also the wetland birds, migratory birds, very rare species of birds that we have. Those species which can be beneficial for the tourists visiting all the way from different part of the world for Nepal. They simply come here for those wildlife, not for sheep and other things. So my question is, have your research touched upon this serious issue?
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is, I'm retired Major Himalaya Thana. First of all, I would like to thank the panelists for the very comprehensive and interesting presentations. My question relates to the non-traditional security issues in South Asia. There are many non-traditional security issues in South Asia. But how are we going to tackle these issues, especially pertaining to terrorism, water, migration, and what you said, aspiration of the people. So, thank you very much.
In short, I can say no, right? Because I've already said the objectives, and our objectives are on transboundary, challenges, civic engagement, and then gender. But then let me share a quick story what people said there actually. We talked to an old man who is 78 years old, right? Who lives there in command area. What he was saying to us was, at that time when this agreement took place in 1964, at that time this was all jungle and nobody thought that population would come here and leave. So government of Nepal did not bother about it at all. So they were fine, right? So I think this can tell about future development as well, right? Because if you don't consider what kind of impacts, ecosystem impacts or community impacts we will have in the future, and jump into sick thing, maybe we can have consequences in the future also, right? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. To answer you first, there will be, every issue will have many other channels and many other views. So while you want to develop a particular issue, say make a idle dam, there would be issues of environment, or there will be issues of tourism, and there are many other issues. So I think governments will have to weigh it out as to what is the relevant, which is the most important issue that needs to be addressed. Now, maybe because it causes too much of devastation and floods, and people get displaced, you lose out on tourism. Well, you have to lose out on tourism to give something else. So there has to be a balance met, and the governance has to come up to this one, sir. Jan Thapa, sir. So very interesting question you raised, and this question has been missing us for good 6-7 decades, as to there is no forum for sorting out our issues. So it's a very serious issue, and there is no clear-cut answer. But the fact of the matter is that there are certain issues which are bilateral between countries, certain issues which are multilateral, and it has to be addressed in that forum and that manner. So if there is a bilateral issue, which Dr. Pandey was rightly mentioning, there is issues on Narani River, or Gandak River, or the command issue, that has to be addressed in a bilateral manner. And all issues, I think, can be debated and discussed, and some via media, joint research like they're carrying out can find an answer. There's certain issues which are multilateral in nature, like for example, Rohingyas coming across, and they come across from Myanmar and Bangladesh, now Bangladesh wanting to push them back, they come down to India, they reach up Jammu regions, they can cross to other areas. That requires a multilateral forum. Now, we haven't had in this subcontinent a very great success story on multilateral forums. Fora, we need to address this issue. And one manner is that if in major discussions like terrorism, which my colleague will take on subsequently, if there is no success of the SARC Convention on Terrorism, maybe it needs to be addressed in another forum, another manner, say BBIN or BIMSTEC or some other forum. Maybe we get across and start talking. Maybe it will expand in time. But to say that only SARC is not a success story and when you're not able to decide on these issues, that's an important facet. And socio-economic development, I just finished here, sir. The issue of aspirations of people. This is a very key issue. That is why communities that we see in India, we are a diverse country. We see communities agitating because that community feels left out. It is aspiring to reach up to other developed communities. So, there is a lopsidedness of development, and we need to address it within the country and across the region. There, I think, much cooperation can be carried out, and much more advancements can be carried out in discussions among ourselves, and I think via media can be found. My personal, of course, I don't represent the government, but my personal recommendation is I think we need to strengthen BBIN for some time to talk multilaterally on multilateral issues.
All panelists for your excellent presentations and active participation from the floor also. So all they have shared their experience and the research they have been doing for quite a long time. And I think with this technical session where we talk about the traditional security, which is transversing from a very range and creating some confusion and an overlapping and a kind of cross-cutting issues in the manifolds of the day-to-day life, from individual life to state or sub-region to a global level. So with this again, under the time pressure, you all have made your excellent presentations. I thank all the panelists, and so here is the session technical session is over. Thank you.
Chair and distinguished panelists for your valuable words which were very informative to us. Ladies and gentlemen, since our chief guest, Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, former Prime Minister of Nepal, has arrived, I would like to express my sincere gratitude for your presence, sir. Now we will be starting the inaugural session. Now, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director of NIICE, to deliver his welcome remark.
Honorable Chief Guest, former Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Madhav Nepal, respected high dignitaries, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all to the first CLAWS-NIICE annual dialogue. First of all, I would like to welcome and thank our Chief Guest, former Prime Minister and Senior Leader of Nepal Communist Party, for accepting our invitation and gracing the occasion. Sir, it's a very formal program with little bit of informality. We started with a technical session and then we started with the Indian work. We must apologize for the delay in the first session. We wanted to end it at 3, but it is slightly delayed. I think your presence here is very important. It's not only ceremonial or cosmetic. We had deep desire to welcome you here because you are the one who had the cabinet meeting on the Everest Base Camp. And environment is one of the major non-terrestrial security threats. I think one of the 2 major non-terrestrial security threats that the world will face, not only Nepal, not only South Asia, the whole world, will be terrorism and environment. Maybe terrorism can be avoided, or we can have mechanisms. Countries are working on that, but I think still we are not very serious about the environment issues. So I have great appreciation for your great work, and that was one of the major reasons that we only thought that we will have you at our event here. I'd also like to welcome our Indian delegates from CLAWS and distinguished participants to today's dialogue. The theme of first CLAWS-NIICE annual dialogue is traditional and non-traditional security issues in South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, let me briefly introduce NIICE, Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, is a research think tank registered under the Companies Act 2006 of Nepal, working towards bringing in research excellence in the field of international relations, security, development, and looking for better approaches for enhanced international cooperation and relations for better, peaceful, and stable world. The major research area of NIICE are issues related to security, like we mentioned earlier, strategy, economy, cyber security, climate change, and energy. And I think these are the major issues that Nepal has to deal in coming days. We established it in 2005, and since then we have around a dozen of publications and several events around the world. We had a few in China, in India, and Nepal. Security issues in South Asia. We plan to hold such events every year in Kathmandu and New Delhi alternatively. In the present global order, non-traditional security issues are more challenging than the traditional ones, and it's not easy to deal with that. Some of the major non-traditional security issues include, first and most prominent, environmental degradation, including climate security. Second, economic disparities. Third, chronic poverty. Fourth, disease and epidemics. 5, transnational crimes, human trafficking and drugs. 6, migration. 7, energy, water and food security. 8, resource wars. 9, disaster management. It also includes the role of military in disaster relief program. 10, terrorism, and maybe 11, corruption, and few others. Non-traditional issues are often defined in political and socio-economic terms, which cause social and political tensions. In order to deal with non-traditional security issues, we need to have unconventional thinking, which can challenge orthodox understanding, because the 21st century presents new paradigm to security. We will also have enough deliberation on the theme as I look forward for your active participation in today's event. Ladies and gentlemen, this is just the beginning. Soon we are going to have such engagement with other reputed Indian think tanks as well as Chinese think tanks. We are going to sign MOU with CLAWS and other Indian think tanks in days to come. We are also working to have collaboration with China Foreign Affairs University, which is funded by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in China, in Beijing, maybe early next year. And for this, we need your continued support and encouragement. I once again welcome you all and hope to have a fruitful engagement. Thank you.
Distinguished fellow CLAWS to introduce CLAWS and give his remarks.
Honorable Shri Madhav Kumar Nepal, former Prime Minister of Nepal, distinguished ladies and gentlemen present here today, very good afternoon, and heartiest greetings that I bring along from CLAWS, our institution which is based in India. A short brief about CLAWS, the Center for Land Warfare Studies. don't take it as only it is land warfare. It is a very broad-based think tank. So I just want to dispel the thought process that we are only traditionally warfare type people, but we think larger issues. CLAWS was established about 15 odd years ago, and it has developed. It has been listed in the University of Pennsylvania listed think tanks globally, which is published. We have come in first 50 in many ways, and have come of age. In the course of last 15 years, we have broad-based ourselves into 5 to 6 major clusters, which are segregated in many forms, and which is on national security, international security, on area studies, on military technology, on non-traditional threats, on terrorism. So they are varied parts of things, and it's all been subdivided into those clusters to study. So there is a vision that we have enunciated for ourselves to be relevant into policy making fields. Many of these think tanks that come up in times become policy irrelevant. Their inputs are rarely sought by policy makers and practitioners, and whatever is produced is underread. So as a vision for CLAWS, we have endeavored to seek an interaction with the authorities in India, the military, etc., to ask them as to what you require, and we carry out focused research which is fed back into the system for analysis and adaptation as is necessary. So we are a policy relevant think tank, and so we believe. In our development, we have segregated the faculties into 2 parts. There are professionals like Dr. Jyoti Prathania, who is ex-JNU, and so there are professional civilians who provide the academic rigor into the institution. And then there are soldiers, soldiers of the army, largely from the armed forces, who get a sabbatical of say 1 year to 2 years, depending on how much time he has he wants to devote, who researches particular subjects as decided by the organization. So like Colonel Rawat, who's going to present in the next session here, going to talk on terrorism. So there are specializations being carried out by colonels who are serving, who get 2 years off from their organization to come and work into CLAWS. So we make a body of about 25, 30 odd professionals into various clusters who produce research and publish it across. And some are not published also because they are classified in nature. So it's a broad-based think tank which has come of age. We have interaction with a large number of other think tanks globally and within India. So for us, NIICE and of all you present here, we wish the beginning that is made today a very fruitful and great success. And thank you very much for the chief guest to honor us today on this great momentous occasion. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable words. Moving further, it is with great honor I would like to request Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, former Prime Minister of Nepal, to give his inaugural speech.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, distinguished scholars, dear participants, friends from different quarters, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for hosting such an important conference. The theme of the conference is quite appropriate and timely, and I thank you for your initiative. Dr. Jaiswal, both institution, and Dr. Shina. I find the conference more significant as it is being organized by the think tanks of Nepal and India. I wish to welcome the Indian participants who have found it convenient to come to Nepal, Kathmandu. I wish them wonderful stay in Kathmandu. I hope that other countries of South Asia are also included in such an engagement in future. In the present global order, it is apparent that non-traditional security threats are more challenging than the traditional one. Terrorism has emerged as one of the greatest challenges in the world. The United States, that used to claim as the most secure country in the world, as it was safely located between two great oceans, was attacked by a few terrorists. The incident now being called 9/11. No country in this world at present can claim to be totally free from terrorist threat. South Asia seems more prone to it. Dear participants and friends, Nepal is committed to combat international terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, including through the implementation of the global counter-terrorism strategy adopted on 8th September 2006 and the various Security Council resolutions such as Resolution 1373 and 1540. Apart from these, there are many other non-traditional security threats that South Asia faces today. Refugee issue is one of them. Nepal has faced the issue of Bhutanese refugees since the last 3 decades. Bangladesh is dealing with the Rohingya. Similarly, the issue of migration is creating conflicts around the world. Furthermore, South Asia is struggling with many other issues like environmental problems, disaster, economic disparities, energy crisis, and water shortage. There are also disputes related to water sharing among the South Asian countries. Problems of transnational crimes such as human trafficking and drugs are equally important. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, among all these, I personally believe that the most challenging aspect that need global attention are environmental degradation and climate security. The basic reason is that these are matters that have global impact, not only in South Asia. Personally, this is one area that has attracted my mind, and I believe that this is one of the challenging tasks that we have to confront given our sensitive ecology and fragile environment. In 2013, I came with a book, Challenges of Environment. Some of you might have read it. South Asia is more prone to environmental challenges as countries in the region are among the world's greatest carbon emitting countries. As Himalayas are the lifeline of over 1 billion people in South Asia, Nepal is particularly concerned over its larger implications. Between the period of 1977 to 2000, Nepal is said to have experienced an annual increase of 0.006 degrees Celsius, leading to increased risk of glacier outburst. Likewise, flash flood has become more frequent and more destructive throughout the region. Delayed and insufficient rainfall has affected the crop production. This has not only led to the emergence of environmental issues, but also other non-traditional security issues like flood security, resource war, migration, etc. In order to deal with food security in Nepal during my tenure, the government of Nepal had paid special attention to increasing national productivity and production. We included a program for farmers by allocating Nepalese 1 billion grant to improve the productivity. In addition, the government has adopted One Village, One Product program to enhance agriculture production. We have also adopted a policy of promoting agriculture-based cooperatives to fight problems of hunger, poverty, and malnutrition. Dear friends and delegates, when I was the Prime Minister, I took another initiative with a view to drawing attention of international community just before the UN Conference on Climate Change called Copenhagen Summit in December 2009, as has been mentioned by Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. I organized a special cabinet meeting at Kala Pathar. You know the word Kala Pathar, not white pathar. It's a black boulder, black stone. The base camp of the world's highest peak, almost 6,000 meters high. In the highest mountain peak, there is Mount Sagarmatha, or Mount Everest, whatever you say. I recall another of our South Asian neighbors, the Maldives, where I have visited there and met with the then the president who has organized such a cabinet meeting under the water. Organized a cabinet meeting under the sea to highlight its specific problems. But that was not so deep. I was thinking that it may be much more deep there. It was in swallowed land only. But here there was no such place, high altitude, 6,000 meters high. Nepal has hosted a high-level regional conference on climate change, with focus on the Himalayan region in order to highlight the seriousness of the problem of global warming and its impact with a 10-point understanding. I would like to mention another issue to draw your attention. When I participated in the Copenhagen Summit, I realized that the world's attention is not on the mountainous countries' problems. Their attention has been focused on the island countries' problem only. And the next, their attention was on the coastal countries' problems only, countries along the seas. But the problem starts from the high mountains, and there were no such initiative from any other institution or any other countries to draw the attention of the world that look, the snows are melting, the mountains are going to be from white to black, and the level of the sea is rising, leading to the vanishing of the island countries. That's why I called for a formation of the Alliance of Mountainous Countries. An alliance of mountainous countries, which are almost 56 in number, and mentioned that there is a need to have such gathering, sitting together, talking about the common problems we have been facing there. And that's why one meeting was organized in Kathmandu, though the plan was to have a high-level summit meeting of prime ministers and the presidents, but the initiative was being taken by me from the ministerial level meeting. So Nepal hosted a high-level regional conference that was a mountainous one, organized with the focus on the Himalayan region in order to highlight the seriousness of the problem. During my premiership, we called on developed countries to abide by their existing commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emission as already agreed within the framework of the Kyoto Protocol. I also shared the following proposition during the climate change conference in Copenhagen 2009 December past. Gender-sensitive sustainable development and poverty alleviation is foremost priority in dealing with climate change issues. Consideration for the planet's future with awareness of common but differentiated responsibilities. Fourth, prioritization of LDCs and most vulnerable countries with very less capacities to withstand the adverse impact of climate change. 5. Long-term substantially enhanced financing of direct and easy access to resources and technology existing within an institutional framework and governance that caters to the interests and concerns of least developed countries. Dear participants and friends, Nepal, as it is located between two economic giants and decidedly the highest carbon emitting countries, have grave environmental risks. If Nepal fails to deal with it on time, it will not only hasten melting of our glaciers, it will have other grave consequences. In order to conserve our environment, I would also like to emphasize the following, which I have stressed during my premiership. First, make compulsory arrangement for at least one green area, government and semi-government offices and in areas surrounding community buildings. Third, launch a plantation campaign along highways, link roads, canals and banks of rivers. Fourth, plant trees and greenery on barren land and on areas where rivers have deposited sedimentation. 5. Promote beautification of each settlement by extending greenery and planting trees on the compound of each household or buildings. 6. Engage each individual, students, youth and different organizations in promotion of plantation as a compulsory campaign each year. 7. Ensure dense plantation on the premises of government quarters, housing areas, factories, big hotels and resorts. If we fail to manage our environmental issues, we are bound to face natural disasters. Earthquakes and floods have been the biggest hazards in terms of mortality, scale of affected population and economic losses as far as Nepal is concerned. The earthquake of April 2015 of Nepal killed 9,000 people and injured 22,000. The total damage was estimated to be $10 billion. Being a least developed country, Nepal faces several challenges in the areas of disaster risk reduction. For instance, public schools in Nepal and children attendance always face serious risk of earthquakes. Most of our hospitals are highly vulnerable to earthquakes as existing facilities are inadequate to respond to disaster emergencies. Nepal is struggling to rehabilitate the infrastructures damaged or affected during 2015. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish this conference all the success and hope this platform which we have created and this dialogue which has been going on will come out with practical recommendations that can help us in resolving these emerging issues. I wish all the success, wish you wonderful deliberation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful remark. As sir said, South Asia is more prone to environment challenge and degradation, which not only has impact on Nepal, but has a global impact, and is a very challenging task. Youth, being the next foundation of the world, it's time for youths to wake up and focus on three dimensions, as sir said, which is multination of environment, good internal management, and education extends in making the environment more friendly, safe, and beautiful for our future. Now, moving further, ladies and gentlemen, may I request CLAWS-NIICE to sign a MOU. So may I please request Dr. Jyoti Pathania, Chairman, CLAWS Outreach Committee, and Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director of NIICE, to kindly come for the MOU signing ceremony. request Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director of NIICE, to hand over the token of love to our chief guest, Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, former Prime Minister of Nepal. General Rakesh Sharma to hand over the NIICE publication to our chief guest. Sumitra Karki, Program Coordinator of NIICE, to give her vote of thanks.
Chief guest Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, respected high dignitaries, distinguished guests, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on the first CLAWS-NIICE annual dialogue. First of all, I, on behalf of Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement, would like to extend our gratitude to former Prime Minister and senior leader of Nepal Communist Party, Mr. Madhav Kumar Nepal, for his glorious presence. We are thankful for his encouragement and support. I would also like to express my sincere appreciations to our delegates from CLAWS, New Delhi. Without their continuous support, it would not have been possible. We wish to work with you in future and believe that we will continue to engage in coming days. I would also like to appreciate all the chairs for successfully conducting the technical sessions. Similarly, I would like to sincerely thank all our distinguished speakers for their wonderful presentations. Finally, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to our media partner, Nobel Business Review, friends from media, MC, volunteers and distinguished guests for their kind presence. We are truly honored to have you all here. Thank you.
Ms. Karki, for your valuable remark. Moving on, I would like to request all the speaker and chief guests to join us for the group photo. Founding Chairperson of Nepal Center for Security Governance, and Ms. Radhika Halder, Program Analyst at NIITI Foundation. Each speaker will get maximum of 10 to 12 minutes. Sir, the floor is yours.
We do power team, they have more time available. 12 minutes to get a kind of rush. Dr. With your permission, I think we will take about 15 minutes each. We have 4 speakers, each one speaking on a different subject, so it will be very interesting. And if you stick to 15 minutes, then we'll have about half an hour of question and answers, which is very important as it is. So first off is my colleague Anurag Singh Rao, Sena Medal. He's a senior fellow of the CLAWS, alumnus of NDA, IMA, Defence Staff College. He's a serving officer of the Mechanized Infantry in the Indian Army, and as serving officer, he's taken 2 years sabbatical to research, and his research theme is emerging security challenges in Afghan-Pakistan region in a time frame of 2025, and what measures are required to overcome it. But then today, his basics is terrorism. He's going to speak to us on terrorism. He has been awarded a gallantry award for counterinsurgency in Jammu and Kashmir. And his subject today is terrorism as an emerging threat in South Asia. May I request Anurag to please give the talk.
Chair. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My colleagues in the first session have already spoken about traditional and non-traditional threats. Terrorism, about which I am speaking, is a non-traditional threat which is fast becoming a traditional one. In the next 15 minutes or so, I'll be covering terrorism as an emerging threat in South Asia. 15 minutes may be slightly too less. However, I'd like to leave you with an overview and some thoughts on the subject. The growing threat of terrorism is a reality that we all live by. Terrorism, in one form or the other, has existed for ages. However, the events of 9/11 and the subsequent global war on terror has, for the last 18 years, firmly kept the world attention on this growing menace. Terrorism thus continues to remain a global challenge and occupies center stage in the international security matrix. Like globalization, it is metamorphosing and linking the world. It's appearing in new forms without any respect for national boundaries. Non-state and state-sponsored terrorists have developed cross-linkages and a remarkable ability to constantly morph into new forms and survive. The Daesh in Syria and Iraq is just one such example. South Asia, which is no stranger to terrorism, continues to battle its growing spectre. It's one of the regions which has been unfavorably affected by this, and it has Pakistan and Afghanistan, which are amongst the top 5 countries which have been impacted by terrorism. In my talk today, I have structured it into these 4 parts. I'll be speaking first. I'll just take a minute or so on talking about what is terrorism. Why haven't we been able to define it? The word terrorism was first used in 1795, referring to the reign of terror that existed during the French Revolution. And there are numerous definitions for terrorism. However, the world, as well as the UN body, has not been able to come to a single, binding and agreeable to all definitions. Or a threat of violence, then it is not terrorism. The common thing that stands through all these definitions is terrorism is a premeditated act where violence is used or threatened to be used to further a religious, political or ideological cause. Let's now take a snapshot at various countries in the region and look at what is the terrorism status. Instead of giving you a broad overview, I thought it would be better and more interesting to look at individually at each country. When we look at cause, while targeting the bad terrorists, that is those who have turned against it, this continuation of policy is despite the spectre of terrorism having come to haunt it in more ways than one. The South Asian Terrorism Portal has said that there have been a decrease in fatalities in Pakistan since 2015. However, proportionately, there's been a decrease in the number of terrorists who have been killed. While the number of civilian casualties from 2015 has increased from about 25% to nearly 53%, thus showing that the civilians are the ones who are bearing the brunt of the casualties. The FATF, as you all know, has grey-listed Pakistan, and the review is due in October, where there are dangers that it could get blacklisted and thus have economic sanctions put on it. The sectarian divide is increasing, and the Islamic State is targeting the Shia population in Pakistan. Nearly about 65 people are supposed to have moved from Pakistan to Syria and Iraq. And in May this year, they declared the Wilaya Pakistan. In Maldives, the conservative observance of Islam has become much more pronounced in the last few years. Some attribute it to the aid that flowed in post the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, where new madrasas got established with foreign teachers and a lot of people moved outside to madrasas outside the country. As per the government estimates, 61 people have moved as fighters to Syria and Iraq. However, others, including the Institutionalized Center for Study of Radicalization, puts the figure to 200. If it is actually 200, this makes Maldives the world's second largest number of foreign fighters per capita. The present government is well aware of the challenges and is taking corrective measures. But one of the greatest challenges is going to be of the returnee fighters. Dealing with these fighters, monitoring them, their rehabilitation, and finally their reintegration into the society is going to be a major challenge, not only for Maldives, but other countries who have people who have gone out to fight. This is the problem which needs to be sorted out. The Northeast militancy has largely been contained with political dialogue and security measures. There is a downward spiral in the number of incidents as well as the deaths that are occurring. Intelligence agencies as well as security agencies in India are constantly monitoring the attempts of Islamic State to spread its dialogue. While there have been no incidents, there definitely have been a few arrests. Creeping radicalization has been impacting Bangladesh. However, the terror-related incidents were low-key and low-scale until the Holy Artisan Bakery attack, which grabbed world attention in July 16, in which the terrorists killed about 22 people, including 17 foreigners. The Islamic State took credit for this. However, as per the government, it was the Jamaatul Mujahideen Bangladesh, or the JMB, and their splinter group, the new JMB. The JMB and the Hujibi both are local groups with transnational affiliations. The JMB is said to have an ideology which is quite similar to the Islamic State, while the Hujibi is supposed to have links with the Al-Qaeda. The Islamic State and the Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent have been quite active in Bangladesh and have claimed nearly 40 attacks since 2015. However, the government has attributed these attacks to local terror organizations and continued with its zero tolerance policy. Sri Lanka, which is no stranger to civil war, was struck by it for nearly stuck in a bloody civil war for nearly 3 decades. However, post 2009, there were no other terror incidents till the Easter blast of 21st April 19, where 8 blasts, including in 3 churches, rocked the island nation. The Islamic State claimed credit for this. There were 2 local Islamist groups, National Tawheed Jamaat and the Jamaitu Milatu Ibrahim, who were suspected to be responsible, with the cleric Zaran Hashim as the mastermind. The Islamic State has been making inroads, and nearly 32 people are supposed to have gone to Iraq and Syria. Nepal has been largely peaceful. It enjoys good relations with both its neighbors, India and China. However, porous borders with India and easy access could be used by inimical elements, and the same may be needed to be guarded against. Bhutan again has been relatively peaceful, other than one operation called Operation All Clear, which was launched in December 2003 against ULFA and its allies, who had established 30 camps in Bhutan. The Bhutanese army cleared these camps at that time. Despite losing territory in Iraq and Syria, the Daesh seems to be increasing in its activity in South Asia, and its 2 new vilayats have been announced. While these 2 new vilayats may just be propaganda, it helps increase its visibility and may attract more followers. The region seems to be witnessing an increase in radicalization, though its diversity actually could have been a positive factor in strengthening the democracies. Deepening of the religious fault lines based on politicization and radicalization seems to be a growing trend. Transnational jihadi terrorism is likely to see an increase in the area. When we look at social media, recruitment, motivation, as well as acting as the main channel of communication is what it is being used by the terror organizations. This is common to all countries in South Asia, less maybe Afghanistan to an extent. It is likely to lead to further tensions. With the territorial defeat of the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda is likely to step up its effort to stay relevant in the region and attempt to regain leadership of the global jihad. Unfortunately, the most effective way of doing that would be to carry out some headline-grabbing terrorist actions. Coming to my last slide, the way forward. At the national level, we have to have comprehensive measures covering intelligence, information, security, legal, and the economic domain. However, the modern day terrorism has a complex and multidimensional character which transcends borders. Terrorists cannot be fought in isolation. Regional cooperation is essential, be it capacity building of intelligence, police and paramilitary forces, putting in an intelligence sharing mechanism, interoperability required for counter-terrorism operations, or be it cooperation in the cyber domain or tracking the funding of the terrorists. In all of these, it is regional cooperation which can take you forward. However, while there is no doubt that regional cooperation on terrorism is the only way forward, an effective forum for the same needs to be functional. At the moment, countries are relying on bilateral ties to counter this menace. The main regional forum, the SAARC, is not very effective due to India's concerns regarding cross-border terrorism by groups based in Pakistan and Pakistan's denial of the same. Maybe it's now time to have a new security initiative, a regional counter-terrorism initiative that would have experts from different countries working together. If functionality issues with a country hinder the effectiveness of such a grouping, then sub-regional models like the South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation or the BIMSTEC are already in place, and those could be followed. Regional cooperation on terrorism is imperative today and cannot be held hostage. Thus, ways and means to make it possible is the only way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Anurag. He said, and I was fascinated by saying a school child killing fellow children is not terrorism. It can cause a lot of terror in minds of people. So is terror different than terrorism? Okay, we have the next speaker, Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt, whom all of you know well, and even we in India know him well. He's a founding chairperson of the National Center of Security Governance, holds a PhD from JNU. Very interestingly, he's currently a member of Parliament in the House of Representatives and served as a member of the Technical Committee and Secretariat of the Special Committee for Supervision, Integration and Rehabilitation of Maoist Army Combatants. Very onerous task. And he is on board of large number of faculties and all well known around here. Dr. Deepak Bhatt, and we look forward to listening to him going to speak upon security sector governance and a very important issue. Dr. Bhatt.
Thank you, Chair. General Sharma, distinguished panelists, and all fellow participants. As we have heard panelists in the first technical session, who have covered the whole range of traditional security issues, and of course the departure from traditional to non-traditional security issues. And with this, I think I don't need to go in what the conventional security is, which is state-centric. Of course, that since the inception of the nation states from Westphalia, but I will link it to the different continents and the movement of the people and the thinking of philosophers. When Chanakya was thinking, when Sun Tzu was thinking in China, and when Thucydides was writing History of the Peloponnesian War. So, and then migration had covered and changed the face of the earth, and of course the humanism and humanity. So, and coming from that whole range and the use of the forces in terms of expanding and all these things, shrinking was there. So, in that sense, this today's initiative with this annual dialogue between two think tanks is a great one. So I think where we can have a regular discourse, discussions on these kind of issues and talk more. So without touching on that, the balance of power and all these things, what we have seen after the two great wars, now we can see in a different form. When there was a end of Soviet era, we have seen that the balance of power was shifting, and now with some new initiatives which are known as the strategies for the geostrategic areas and with geopolitical dimensions, it has been coming with new ideas. I will touch upon these 2 or 3 initiatives, 2.5 initiatives, one is just starting later. So protection of state and territory was there. And when we talk about the unconventional, and again the issue was covered in the earlier session where we see that it was 80s when the globalization was in the early phase, and 90s when it was entering into the every corner of the nations and societies. That perspective, if we look at the developing societies, there are 2 words. One is wealthier, where they have a different kind of worries and the insecurity in their mind. But on the other hand, just we have heard about the terrorism, it is not only limited to the poor, unemployed, and the weaker section of the society are joining the terrorist organizations. So that example is completely reversed in case of Dhaka attacks and Easter Sunday attacks. So we don't need to go in that much detail. So these are 2 paradigms. And without going into the human security, Mahabubul Haq and Amartya Sen came up with these 7 dimensions of the human security, and fortunately in Nepal's constitution we have mentioned that the human security is the basic security that which state will try to provide through all its endeavor. So this is where we have been talking. And now coming to the security sector governance, it has become a more prominent and relevant issue in all the established democracies or societies or transitional societies like Nepal. Sometimes we can take an example of similarly Sri Lanka and Pakistan and other countries. The major issues in security sector governance are the main actors, the state security actors are defense forces, paramilitary and the security forces, like we have APF here, which is not paramilitary. In India, there are many other security forces which are not paramilitary. And intelligence and the secret services. If you look at, these are very important and pertinent and becoming more and more pertinent. And police and gendarmerie. These are the institutions which have been remained core actors directly handling with the people in front as a law enforcement. Border, maritime, and the custom guards. The size of all these institutions have been enlarged in the last few decades. This is not only the case of that Nepal that we have seen that during the conflict or during the insurgency, size of Nepalese army has gone, Nepali army has gone from 40 to 45,000 to 90, just 99 once. And APF, the new institution was created, and the size of the armed police force is 40,000 plus, about 45,000. Nepal police, at the beginning it was 35,000, now it has gone up to the 72,000. So the doubling of the size, and this is not the case here. That in very few cases only that we have seen very modern weaponization system, and the modernization and the right sizing debate is there. So the justice system also comes under these actors, where courts and the prisons are very related to the all these areas. If you look at the non-state security actors, there are bigger in size than existing security forces, institutions. If we talk about Nepal, the number is, though we have not done a very rigorous or very in-depth research, no think tank, no university, or the academia, or anybody, but yes, there are reports that more than 350,000 people are working in the private security. And in India's case, we have read some articles, it is about 7 million plus. So you can imagine, but how they will be governed, how the governance system will be working in this particular area is a big challenge here. So private military and the security companies, and these are different in Afghanistan and Sri Lankan case and Maldives case, and Pakistan also. So it is not only the Nepal and India. So in whole the region, except, I haven't heard any, specific, I haven't read anything in Bhutan, but in all other countries, yes, they are there. Rebel groups, armed groups, and child soldiers has become a big issue. In Nepal, transitional justice and all this part is still there, is still hindering the remaining part of the peace process. And rebel groups everywhere, they are also in their, some occupied area. They seems like they are the security actors. And at some level, they have shown that they are providing a kind of security, or the state of security in the mind of the people under their control. So, and institutions, so they are also coming as a non-state oversight mechanisms. So with these 4 areas where the security governance area is touched and where we have to be serious are the issues. And diversified challenges, I don't need to go into details because we have talked about the terrorism region and the global context also. And we have talked about the unemployment and the food scarcity and water and everything. So this list is bigger, but in terms of federalization in that police context, we have a big challenge while setting up the Nepal police in provincial manner. And the cases, we have seen that India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, which have a British mindset of the policing, is still hampering, and the old act, and they are having, we can have a more discussion on that in any particular, in the days to come, but the cases they have produced are, there are problems, and we are copying the same model. So the bigger challenge will be coming for us to federalization of this context. But I'm not going into that one. This is the major point where I want to make is the cyber war. And this, if we look at the cyber conflict, is a big threat in the national sovereignty. Recent case, the banks, the ATMs are hacked, and they are not only hacking the ATMs here in Kathmandu, they have done this job in India. In the Cosmos Bank, the big money was transferred to the North Korea earlier, and from Bangladesh, more than $80 billion has been transferred, swiped. So this is happening in the region, not only, but globally. So, and the cryptocurrency, if you look at the digital rights and management, Bitcoins, we have very fantastic example that Bitcoin Seva Prali was registered here, and they were openly saying that we are serving Bitcoins and producing Bitcoins. And a 59-year-old guy was producing Bitcoins in the Dolakha remote area, but he is having all the facilities without knowing it. So these are, and drones are coming in a different way to pose a new challenge in the security arena. So from wallet, or from mobile, or the internet access everywhere, the cyber world and the cryptocurrency and the cryptology and all these things are coming with more complexities. So we have to have a very comprehensive manner in this particular area also. So with this, I will make my presentation. Thank you.
Comprehensive talk, very wide charter covered from terrorism to bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. So thank you very much for all that, and very interesting to note how the rehabilitation and integration was carried out of the Maoists. Very fine work done in Nepal, which we have followed with great interest. Thank you, Dr. Bhatt. Now we have Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, who requires no introduction. He is the research director of the CLAWS-NIICE and teaches in Trivandrum University, Chopra University, visiting fellow in large number of Chinese. So, ma'am is very happy. She's also JNU. There's really out here. Dr. Jaiswal now speaks to us on environmental security, disaster management, South Asia. Or 15 minutes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Actually, there is a saying in India that if there is no genuine in international conference, especially related to IR, it's not a credible conference.
But to carry a jhola.
Yes.
If you don't carry a jhola, you're not there.
Jhola is still very important. Once you cross JNU, then you become very. Thank you, sir. I'll be talking basically on environmental security and disaster management in South Asia. I'll be very quick because I have tried to put it in 10 minutes, so let me try my best. South Asia is among the world's most vulnerable region to both natural and man-made disasters. Over the last 25 years, disasters have killed nearly 500,000 people in South Asia, and the financial damage worth $59 billion, 23,000 people, severely injured or disabled another 70,000, and left 2.8 million homeless. Similarly, in Nepal, in April 2005 earthquake, 9,000 people were killed and 22,000 were injured, and the total damage was estimated to be $10 billion, which is a huge amount. The rehabilitation cost of the 2004 tsunami disaster for India, Sri Lanka and Maldives is estimated to be $3 billion. The overall cost associated with the October 2005 earthquake is estimated to be approximately $5.2 billion. So you can see how there is a huge financial loss when it comes to this kind of disaster. South Asia region has extremely high environmental stress resulting from flood, the scarcity of water, high urban population density, energy shortage, deforestation, air pollution, environmental degradation, resource depletion, and natural disaster have direct implications in preventing or responding to environmentally caused conflicts and protecting the environment due to its inherent moral value. I think the need for environmental security in changing global order context is very changing, it's very different, and there are a few major important issues that we need to deal. First is complex and uncertain international security landscape that we are facing. There's the issue of multipolarity in all sense, economic, political, military. There's an increased number of fragile states, national instability, interstate versus intrastate. All these issues has come when it comes to dealing with environmental security. There is continued growth and power of non-state actors. There is multi-dimensional conflict, hybrid nature threats. Similarly, climate change, nature of operation and impact of military capabilities is also increasing in days to come. Technological advancement, both weapons as well as weaponizable things are there. Militarization of global commons, space, EMPs, etc., national and man-made, both are included. New forms of defense strategy and cooperation are emerging. Change of focus from nation-centered to global. Integration of non-traditional security issues in security strategies are emerging. A strengthening environmental jurisprudence has emerged. So far, there are more than 1,200 environmental courts around the world. I think it's more than 41 countries. And Convention of Cluster Munitions, NPT, and all these are the major impact which has been having around the world. Another is like permanent court of arbitration for environment damage during armed conflict is emerging, and international court on environment crimes and rights of the earth. There are some areas of district agreement in spite that all the countries have been realized the grave concern of environment issues. There are some areas they differ. First is the access to the polar region, of course resources and their use. They have differences, different countries have different view on that. Enforcement of MEAs, monitoring system and models, they are different, they don't agree on that. Security implication of environmental aspects, biodiversity protection, there are variation on that. Synthetic biology and nanotech safety strategies, implication of new weapons technologies, nuclear non-proliferation, climate change and post-coitus strategy. Not even the great power countries, the developed countries are on the same plane. Outer space security. So these are the major issues where different countries, economic potential, the fuel political tensions around the country, transboundary environmental issues, like one polluting the other, like when there is flood on the upper, how it is affecting downstream, industrial pollution, because it passes from one country to another. So bursting of dams, these are things that have transboundary environmental problems. Like for example, we're talking about India and China polluting the region and how Nepal will be affected on that. So how do Nepal or the countries in such situations deal with those issues? framing environmental and population issues as security problem and raising international awareness of environmental threats could spur collective action among countries and promote better compliance with international environmental agreements. Similarly, the environmental and security rhetoric would contribute to generating funds, public support and action-oriented responses necessary to achieve sustainable development and population goals in developing countries. Environmental stress are additional threat to state stability. Military and intelligence agencies should monitor and analyze to mitigate environmental catastrophes and protect natural resources. I have been, when I was in India working in different think tanks, I have been studying like how they used to bring Brahmaputra as a weapon, like how China can use Brahmaputra river as a weapon. So that is how the issues of environment, like if Brahmaputra blasts or maybe the water can be used as a weapon. So this kind of new debates also emerging in days to come. The environmental and security rhetoric will contribute to generating, let me briefly talk about environmental concern for South Asia. There are few that I have listed here. Let me briefly talk about them. First is poverty and environment nexus. I think both cannot go together. Similarly, there is rural-urban divide, which is growing greater. At the same time, there can be shortage of safe drinking water, adequate sanitation, and health services that can bring conflict or problems. Third is shared environmental concerns, like as bulk of population depend on livelihood. There are reasons for countries, basically the developing countries, that they are highly dependent on forests, farms, river ponds and all, and that can have a greater impact. Land degradation is another, like soil erosion. There is rapid rate of deforestation. Poor irrigation system are there. In South Asia, there is drainage practices. Inadequate soil conservation steps are not taken. Steep slopes and organizing. These are very common. Overgrazing and all are common situation in South Asia which need to be dealt. Similarly, deforestation and loss in biodiversity is there. Terrestrial and coastal ecosystems are being destroyed. Since trade, the people in South Asia basically they use forest products for trade. There is improper use of agrochemicals and uncontrolled tourism and all that also has an impact. Water availability and quality is another, where there is resource scarcity as a result of population pressure, all because of urbanization and increasing population. Atmospheric pressure is another, because India and China, they are known as gas chambers. They also have substantial reserves of coal, and it is believed that they can use that when there is scarcity of energy. So that's another very important. Fourth is climate change, because we all know that there is rapid rise in temperature. It is estimated that 0.1 Celsius to 0.3 Celsius temperature has been increased from 2010. So there is again the change in pattern of rainfall around the world. There is rise in sea level. Maldives is one example. So these are the issues that has an impact in South Asia. Another is trans-boundary movement of hazardous waste. Basically, like we often use basic products like paint, battery, pesticides, solvents, and all. And these are very dangerous when it comes to climate, environment. How will you take care of those wastes and all? So there's another that has to be dealt. And last is natural disaster, which is very common in South Asia, Nepal, India, basically northeast part of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh has been facing. Similarly, I think there are four major risks for South Asia. One will be increase in population and per capita consumption level. When there is an increase in population, at the same time people are getting richer. They try to demand more and they try to consume more. So that can also create a kind of resource scarcity. At the same time, if not, it can also pollute. Second is that unequal distribution of resource among the population of the region, because we all know that South Asia is highly diverse. There is huge economic disparity, and that can also cause as a major conflict. Third is internal conflict. The conflict can be through migration, it can be through resource scarcity, it can also be within the region, or it can be within the country. Fourth is climate change and environment degradation in neighboring states. For example, the impact of India and China, like melting of glaciers can be happening here in Nepal, which can cause water scarcity, it can cause food security as well. There can be hydro conflict between different countries. There can be disaster conflict with disaster management, which can have another significant spillover effect and depression on international security. Let me briefly talk about the disaster in South Asia. You can see the graph that how there is sharp increase in the events that is related to earthquake, flood, and storm. Disaster risk management, basically I have just put the data here. You can see that it is increasing day by day. the number of disaster issues in South Asia has been increasing since the past, and these are the individual data that maybe I'll try to put it when it's in the form of paper. We all know the case history of Nepal, but then we come to the drivers of disaster. What are the major drivers? I think the first is population growth. You all know that all the South Asian countries, there is increasing trend in population. That is one. Second is economic expansion, that the countries are getting richer. India is emerging as an economic power, Nepal is the growth rate is doing quite well, Bangladesh is emerging, so that will also have an impact on environment, because they need to invest on those. Another is urbanization, because with the emergence of economic capabilities, there will be urbanization in South Asia, and that will have another impact on disaster, or you can say what you call environment. And the last can be mismanagement, because we all know that South Asia is one of the most mismanaged regions, because we don't have strong control of any of the issues, policies. Basically, when it comes to environment and disaster, we are very careless. So I think they are the major things that will be there. Vulnerability and disaster risk in South Asia. First, high population density. We all know that. Weak governance, both local and urban. Climate change issue will be there. High rate of urbanization. No effective local structure, both in place of disaster preparedness, or you can say that disaster risk reduction, that in both issues we are not doing quite well. There is high rate of women youth unemployment in the region, and there can be rampant rural poverty. Increased population and degradation of natural resources can be there. Similarly, I think how we can deal with that, I think for that we need disaster management, and the first can be risk identification. First of all, we must need to understand what are the risks, because you can act only when you identify the risk. Second can be shifting the focus from past to the present and future. We always look at the past and try to only deal with the current problems. We have to look at it through not only present but to the future level. Third is risk awareness. Collectively work on disaster management. And improving institutional capability is very important for all the countries to do. I think I'll end here, and if there's a question, I'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal. Very interesting talk and very interesting presentation, very comprehensive one. I enjoyed listening about environment as a weapon, and whether it can be utilized as one of interesting to talk about. And also that South Asia is a very mismanaged region. The last and the most important speaker, I'm not saying the least, the most important speaker is Ms. Radhika Haldar, Program Analyst at NIICE Foundation, Kathmandu, specialized in global terrorism, radicalization, violent extremism. And she's done her Masters in International Relations in University of Sussex, England. Recently published a book titled Understanding Suicide Terrorism. Very interesting subject, and I don't know how I missed it. But she's also from Delhi, from one of the think tanks called CAPS, which I know well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And a very good evening to everyone. I am aware that I'm the last speaker of the day, so I have the task of not being repetitive and trying to keep the audience as engaged as possible. Also, the topic that I have chosen to speak on is radicalization and terrorism in South Asia. And of course, Colonel Rawat has comprehensively explained to us about terrorism as an emerging threat in South Asia. So I would like to focus a little more on radicalization and why terrorism thrives. Try to attempt to understand why people become terrorists and how vulnerable South Asia is in that context. We've spoken about security earlier today, and I don't think I need to go into much detail, but just to give a quick recap, security in different countries exists because security would loosely mean the state of being free from danger or threat. And danger and threat itself is a very subjective concept. Of course, we've spoken about Barry Buzan as well earlier today, and he broadly mentions 3 levels of national security. That is state security, societal security, and human security, which we've spoken about over here. But when security measures are not adequate enough, then we look at the opposite of security. We're forced to look at the opposite of security, especially being South Asians, because that then brings us to the issue. What are the security issues in South Asia? And so insecurity, I would loosely define as the state of being open to danger or threat, or the lack of protection, and of course the feeling of vulnerability. And vulnerability is key, and I'm going to keep mentioning this throughout my presentation. There are some common characteristics present in South Asia that also have immense potential for vulnerability and insecurity in varying degrees. The threat posed by these insecurities and vulnerabilities, the biggest threat that these pose are the fact that it can take different forms of expressions. So whether it's porous borders or governance issues, corruption, unemployment. We've spoken about aspirations of the people that are perhaps not being met, migration, displacement, the presence of extreme diversities along ethnic and religious lines, and of course minorities and marginalized communities. Each of these characteristics feature in every South Asian country in different degrees. And what they also present are spaces for vulnerability. And like I said, the problem with vulnerability is that more than often there is an urge to express vulnerabilities by citizens, and one of the most lethal forms of this expression would be terrorism. I again will not go into much detail, but essentially we can agree, of course there's no widely accepted definition of terrorism, but we can agree on a few common characteristics, a few traits of terrorism, the way we see it in the world today. And essentially it is the use of fear as a tool for coercion to achieve objectives. These objectives can be political, social, religious. We've seen that they are mostly political. So terrorism essentially feeds on fear, of course. It feeds on narratives that are either rooted in religion, as we see today, or several other narratives. And of course it feeds on audiences. By audiences I mean that terrorism does not only target a certain audience, does not target the victims, but also targets the people that are witnessing the terror attack, sitting in their homes, watching the terror incidents on TV. So terrorism thrives on publicity. Broadly we can say, this is the definition that I use to define terrorism, because there is no globally accepted definition, and this serves the purpose for my research. Terrorism is the use or threat of use of violence by non-state actors in order to instill fear in a specified target, which includes innocent civilians. I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of terrorism or modern terrorism, because I will have to digress a little bit from South Asia to explain how modern terrorism has taken shape, and then what kind of implications it has for South Asia. So essentially I look at from the 1980s when we see a phase of at least the 2 decades from the 1980s to 2000. We see broadly nationalist-based movements. So there were organizations like Hezbollah or the LTTE in South Asia that were fighting for their land, that were fighting for their people. Hezbollah was in Lebanon, and of course the Tamil Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam was in Sri Lanka, formed by the Tamil population that felt that they need to create an army to fight against the predominant Sinhalese Sri Lankans, because they needed to fight for their land. And so essentially in this phase we see terror organizations fighting for land, fighting against what they perceive as occupiers or invaders of their land. And within this phase there is also another interesting development that takes place that also starts developing the onset of the next phase, which is the evolution of modern jihad. And I can go on for hours about this, but I'll just say that it was marked by 3 incidents. Theocratic regime in Iran that was established around that time, the siege of Mecca, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. And with the Soviet invasion, Afghanistan suddenly becomes this theater of militancy, warfare and terrorism, and of course the formation of Al-Qaeda. What the formation of Al-Qaeda brought to the world is essentially, I'm going to talk in a little detail about Al-Qaeda, because today the kind of terrorism that we see, that trend has been set by this organization. It has in many ways been a trendsetter of modern day terrorism. And so what Al-Qaeda mastered was basically transforming a local resistance movement, a movement that was, the struggle against the Soviets in Afghanistan, and gave it a regional fervor. So essentially, leaders such as Osama bin Laden rose to prominence because they realized that if we call out to, in this case, fellow Muslims from across the region, they will come and they will fight for us if we contextualize our fight in a way that they also see eye to eye with our cause. And so, of course, the rise of Osama bin Laden, along with, he had several other leaders that had set up a base in Afghanistan that were accommodating fighters that were traveling from all across West Asia to fight the jihad in Afghanistan. And even after the Soviets left Afghanistan, it was realized by Al-Qaeda that there is some potential in basically redirecting local movements with a sort of global or a regional flavor so as to gain more traction. Al-Qaeda then also declared a war against the Americans occupying the land of the two holy places, which basically refers to Iraq and Saudi Arabia in this case, which was still a very specific declaration. And then what happened was the declaration of the World Islamic Front for Jihad against the Jews and Crusaders. This is extremely significant because this is a global declaration of war. And so essentially what Al-Qaeda did with that was that it of course gave a transnational flavor to terrorism. It understood the meaning of giving local resistance movements a global direction and voice. Also basing ideology in religion. Religion is one of the most powerful unifying agents because it's something so personal. And therefore the goal resonated with sympathizers across the world. Essentially, organizations like the LTTE and Al-Qaeda managed to, become these very strong, powerful, charismatic leaders. They managed to destroy all aspects of their followers' lives by promoting alienation from broader society. This alienation may already exist, in which case it has been exploited or it has been made to realized. And the leader slowly started becoming like a godlike individual for his followers. By systematically polarizing individuals and fostering an idea of us versus them. So this, what you're seeing on this slide, is exactly how radicalization in this particular phase began and developed. Similar
in a regional collaboration or cooperation. In Nepal earthquake 2015 is a very good example of regional support, because all our neighboring countries responded quickly and very effectively. Like the Indian National Disaster Response Force landed here in the same day, and Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, including Bhutan also sent their responders within 72 hours. That was a very critical period, and Nepal was very thankful for that support. However, that effort was not in a regional basis. That was in our bilateral relations. Being a very close nation, bilateral relation, why? Spontaneous reaction we got it, but we could not collaborate that as a regional phenomenon. Whereas we are interlinked in such a way that, like we had an earthquake in 2011 at the Nepal-India border, right at the no man's land of Sikkim and Taplejung. That earthquake has effect on Nepal, Tibet, India obviously in Sikkim, Bhutan, and Bangladesh as well. And we popularly say, "Nabbe saal ko bhuichal." That is, the old knows about that Nabbe saal ko bhuichal as a 1934 Bihar earthquake. Because those days Nepal was very protected and effect was more in other side of the border, that was in Bihar. So, but later on we come to know that epicenter is in Sangwa district of Nepal. So this kind of connectivity is there, and we had there was a hudud in a cyclone in the Bay of Bengal, and many mountaineers were trapped in Nepal. So that kind of connectivity. So if we could do something in a disaster reduction at least, so that we can minimize the effect of disaster in our region, how, if we could shed some light that how we can enhance our collaboration effectively, so that in the coming days we can minimize the risk on that and we can respond very effectively. Thank you, sir.
From Afghanistan. We are the victim of terrorism
every time I try to say the reality. In Afghanistan, like in South Asia, every country have their own definition for terrorism. Like sir mentioned that Pakistan still believe in bad and good terrorism. I living in near to border, Pakistan border in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Afghanistan. India and that's the reality that we should accept that in the people in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa fighting for their right, they define a terrorist group, Pakistan. In the people that fighting against in Afghan government in other country that they define that they say that they are not a terrorist. This is the problem in South Asia. In Afghanistan, Afghan government many times they share the evidence with the international community that in the area of Taliban, they are fighting they kill the Taliban in the people that are fighting against Afghan government. When they identify, they belong to the army, Pakistan. How in this one country that directly supporting terrorism against other country, how is cooperation is possible in how can this South Asian country find a unified definition for terrorism to promote the cooperation in fight against terrorism in South Asia? Thank you.
Thank you. I allow you. Yes.
Thank you very much to all presenters. And my first question goes to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal.
Identify yourself, please.
Sorry?
Please identify yourself.
I'm Chandra Pandey from Kathmandu University. My first question, I have two questions actually. The first one goes to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and second to the whole panelists, whoever can respond. Dr. Jaiswal, you said somewhere like there's a nexus between poverty and environment which cannot go together, right? If we study the literature on environment, what we can see is, the environmental degradation has taken place because of pollution of poverty and pollution of affluence, right? So it's not only about poverty, but also of affluence. So how do you put these ideas into perspective? What are they just say? And second thing, we've discussed quite a number of issues today, right? From terrorism to cybersecurity, climate change to water, lots of issues. But again, we are in South Asia. For example, if you talk about Nepal, probably in Nepal, people who are doing research in environmental security issues, probably don't want to focus on, let's say, coastal prevention or those kinds of things for Nepal. Because they might focus on water, climate, mountain regions. Whereas people in Sri Lanka might focus on tsunami and those kinds of things. So I just want to know, as a researcher also, I'm a researcher, so what are the priorities of these different issues that we have discussed actually, and is there any way that we can say, okay, number one is this priority, number two this priority, number three this priority, or are they equally prioritized? Given South Asia is not able to handle all these things at one time, so are there any ways to prioritize these issues? Thank you.
Okay, I will respond to you. I find the question very interesting. Please.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, AIG Thapa, to whom I know for quite a long time, as he speak his mind, being a practitioner, and then of course that when we are facing a bigger challenge of the federalization, from unitary to federal, it was a big challenge to hold all kind of mechanisms at the provincial and the local level. Now, in terms of the voices were raised during the insurgency, many sections have been getting gradually benefit. Like if you talk about the Dalit, Janjati, Mahila, Madesi, all marginalized communities, identities, by region and by other means, have getting good representation in security forces. The number has gone like from not zero, but if you look at the army, Nepal army, the then Royal Nepalese army, there were only the medical force and then the technical force. Now, the female has gone up to the major, and they have successfully passed the command and staff college. So we see that they are coming, and it is similar in the armed police force and the Nepal police. So the number, in terms of inclusion, has gone up to about 4% plus. So which is, it is not only for that part, from other, Dalit and Madesi and all these things. So gradually that is accepted by society in all the, not only the society but in the government, these kind of infrastructures. And federalizing all these things, the synergy coming and the resilience coming from the society is great. So I think it is positive. And the challenges, I mentioned briefly about the act British promulgated and which is have been practiced by India, Pakistan and Bangladesh in terms of federalization of the police. And if you look at the literature, if you talk with the police officers and the security officers, even our generals and colonels from the Indian Army can briefly said that the policing system in India itself or the Bangladesh and Pakistan itself is that they are facing challenges.
7 provinces, and they belong to the provincial administration. There would be politicization of police, because that provincial administration, whichever party it belonged to, would lead the police to what they want police to do and not what the nation requires the police to do. So that federation of police, what we have Dr. Bhatt has rightly pointed out, we have carried forward from British times. We are feeling the pinch of it in the nation. There is I'm saying that we are feeling that the police has got so politicized because of the federation that they are not able to match up to the national requirements of police force. So there is an issue here. The second issue I wish to raise is that, is it an era of specialization now? Is a general policeman worth it? Or we need to have a specialist policeman? You are an experienced handsome. Whenever we see a policeman, he wants to check whether I am drunk or not. So my kind of police is different. We feel that policeman, that Thana fellow, the man who looks after your locality, is of immense importance, because what we call Thanada, you call SHO, because he has to have the pulse of the area he belongs to. He ought to know that there is a factory here in his backyard which is producing bombs. But how does the Thana fellow doesn't know the basic intelligence of what is happening in his small locality? He ought to know it. If he doesn't know it, then he is not performing his job. So there is a Thana chap. There is a specialization required in a manner that you take on terrorist actions. There should be manner of people studying. You mentioned madrasas, for example. You mentioned madrasas, conversions, Hinduism. You see, there has to be specialization in this manner. But Miss Radhika, she says about radicalization is so important that what is the basic problem a nation faces today? We will feel it is not criminology. Police will handle crime in some manner. It's a question of radicalized society. The ideological change that is happening, which we are not able to.
Disaster, the way we are dealing is only at bilateral level. We had very good relations with China, India, and every nation responded promptly. Imagine if it had happened in India, Pakistan. How many would have turned up? Maybe only China or 2 countries will enjoy very good relations with India and others. So what I want to say is that we need a regional framework, because relation can change, but we need a framework where we can deal with these kind of issues. So for that we need institutional capacities and regional framework. Second, we are doing on bilateral level, even at military level, like Nepal, China often have military drill, and it is related to disaster management. India, Nepal have a military exercise and it's related to disaster management. So on bilateral level, we have been engaging at different levels, at different fronts and all, but not in a regional framework. Answering to Chandra sir, what I want to say is that, like in South Asia, the poverty and the poverty nexus is that maximum population in this region are poor, and that for livelihood they have to rely on forest, water, like fishermen, carpenter, farmer. They have to rely on those kind of issues. So they will not take care of environment issues. They will just take care of their life. They will not be bothered if people are cutting down trees on ring road, because it doesn't matter to them. So they are not aware. Second, even if they are aware, they will not look at those issues. So that's why people who are poor, they just try to focus more on their livelihood. That's what I want to say. On issue of priority, I think yes, like our former Prime Minister Mahathir Nepal, he said that the world is giving more importance to coastal countries. not to the mountain countries. And he rightly pointed out that how will Maldives go underwater? Only when North Pole is melt, when the glacier in Nepal melts down. So I think that is the root cause. Source is the snow. So we should work how can we stop melting of snow. So that is the source. We have to work on the source. We are not working on the source. We are working on the cause. That is what I think in terms of priority we should give more importance to mountainous countries. But the major of the countries are not mountainous and they're not powerful countries. So that is why it's more on the coastal countries. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Afghanistan, in your own personal experience, just adds meat to what was flashed about good and bad terrorist policy being followed by Pakistan. And your viewpoint is very important because you have seen it firsthand. I completely agree with you when you say that if a country is following this kind of policy, how can you have a regional cooperation? The way ahead, in fact, that is the reason why we have not had a very effective regional cooperation on terrorism. And while on some issues, bilateral cooperations or even trilateral cooperations can take the day forward, terrorism today in South Asia is an issue in which regional cooperation is essential. However, like I had suggested even as a recommendation, one of the way forwards then could be that if we are getting stuck with a particular country, we have a sub-regional grouping which includes at least all the other countries. That the same thing has already been done in some of the initiatives, like the South Asia sub-regional economic cooperation that's being carried out, or the BIMSTEC which has been done. Most of the countries around have been included. Afghanistan, yes, is not part of BIMSTEC, but a sub-regional cooperation based on excluding a country which may be hindering regional cooperation on that subject seems to be the only way forward at the moment. A perfect example or a perfect state would be where it's a regional cooperation. However, when things stand as they do today, I think sub-regional is the way forward.
Okay, I will add one issue which Dr. Jaiswal has raised and what the former Prime Minister raised as to the importance of Himalayas or glaciated regions versus coastal regions. And it is romantic now to talk about coastal regions because most trade goes to coastal regions, and people are not much bothered about the mountainous regions. Now, actually, we have to sell it. You know, we means we are 10 countries which are based in the largest snow belt in the world other than the two Arctics and Antarctica. There is Himalayas and Tian Shan mountains. You combine these two together and even take on Pamir Knot. If you take Pamir Knot also, then this is the most important ice receptacle in the world after the Antarctica and Arctica. We have to sell it. Now, what does it mean? There are nearly 1.5 billion people who reside in the wake of these mountains. In Nepal, in Pakistan, in partly Afghanistan, in Bhutan, in Bangladesh, in Myanmar, in China. 1.5 billion people stay close to the Himalayas and dependent on it because of the water supply. We have to sell it. We have to tell the world, you are not talking about, if you say about 2 billion, we are talking about nearly 1/4 of the global population which is actually dependent on these Himalayas. Only thing, we are not selling it across. So if you don't sell it to the world is not bothered about you. They are bothered about the coast because they are looking forward to their beaches and etc. etc. So there are 10 major river basins, all very major rivers starting from this region, Nepal, and all around it. Biggest of 10 biggest rivers start from this basin. So we have to sell it. We have to say, yeah, listen, if this ice pack melts, be rest assured, part Bangladesh and Maldives is underwater. And how much it will affect, God alone knows. And you know what will it affect? It affects the largest 14% of wheat produced in the world is produced in this belt between Tarai of Nepal and Tarai of Uttarakhand in India and the Tarai UP and Bihar. because this is the wheat belt. So you say, you know, you're not bothered about the ice pack. Well, you are missing out food relationships. Only thing is, you know, we get enamored by Indo-Pacific. You know, Indo-Pacific is a new buzzword in town, and we not selling our issues. Just see this, the damage being done. That was my view on this one. Okay, we can have one more round of anybody who wants to ask question. Yes, sir.
Right. Good evening. It was interesting presentation. My question straight goes to
countries in South Asia when we address or mitigate the issues which is raising in terms of security, especially in the South Asian regions. Thank you.
Mountains, they are prone to landslides, to accident, everything. We are prone to floods every year. We are prone to drought every year. One side it is flooding, across the other side there is drought. You know, this is the kind of, we need to manage, and then of course radicalization, terrorism, and so many things happening together. We need a body which studies this, and they have experts in this line who would debate on these issues, and who knows here which country will give what at what time. We are the largest contributors to United Nations in South Asia, between Nepal, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. Largest contributors to United Nations. Why? Because we earn money. This is a part. But you know, it is there. But we can't contribute to ourselves. I think we need to have some regional mechanisms which are effective. If a country doesn't want to participate, so be it. Maybe others will participate. Does India have a de-radicalization program?
And thank you very much, NIICE, for looking after us. The professor and our team, three of us, we were looked after. There was warmth, which is more important than anything else. There was open arms welcome. So I wish to thank on behalf of Dr. Tanya and Colonel Rag and myself. Thank you, and we'll do good business together. Thank you. Yours.
Thank you, Chair and distinguished panelists, for enlightening us and shedding light on the important topic. Thank you all. Distinguished guests, we have now come to an end of our program. May I request Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, Research Director, to hand over the token of love to all the speakers. First, I would like to call Lieutenant General Rakesh Sharma. Colonel Anurag Singh Rawat. Dr. Jyoti Pathania. Dr. Deepak Prakash Bhatt. Dr. Chandra Pandey. Ms. Radhika Halder. Thank you all. Now I would like to request Dr. Jyoti Pathania, Chairman CLAWS Outreach Committee, to hand over the memento to Dr. Pramod Jaiswal.
National security objectives.
lots of homework, lots of
Now this Indian Army book for your institution. It's the Indian Army book for the institution.
Please request Colonel Anurag Singh Rawat, Senior. I will marking this event with your glorious presence. Ladies and gentlemen, here we conclude our today's program. Let us join our hands to all the chair and panelists. Thank you, everyone. And I would also like to request you all to join us for the dinner. Thank you and good night.